All right, it is Friday, people, here, November the 22nd. Yeah, gnaw on that for a little bit. That's right, gobble, gobble. It's almost that time of year, but it's certainly our favorite time of year, college basketball. It is in full effect. What a loaded day we have today. Welcome in. Happy Friday. You've made it to the end of the week. It's another edition of the Happy Hour Tip-Off Show, brought to you by, or powered by, rather, wagertalk.com. He is Ralph Michaels at wagertalk.com. And it started early here today, guys. If you know, over 50 games on the card. A lot of these tournaments taking place right now. I'm sure you've noticed, and we're going to start seeing more and more of these over the holiday season. So, Ralph, I think it's a good time to remind the viewers here. Is there anything you do differently when, you've got these early games, you've got these tournaments game? Is your approach change a little bit here?
There's a lot you do differently. Number one, coaches clearly admit that they look ahead to who their next opponent is if they have a big lead in the second half. Number two, looking at minutes played. I tweeted out something this morning at Cal Sports LV. You look at Villanova and Mississippi State, the matchup in Myrtle Beach today, and you look at what Villanova did. Well, they played 12 or 13 players, and nobody played over 24 minutes. You look at the Mississippi State box score, 5 players played over 26 minutes. 3 players, I believe, played over 32 minutes. So that's a big advantage when you're looking in the second halves of the second games, and especially in the third games. If you've got a team that, perhaps plays 50 minutes of 2 days compared to teams that are playing 70 minutes when you get into that third day, those tempos matter quite a bit. So, and again, injuries. It's not always easy to get those injury reports from the night before until the next morning. Go to the school websites, look at their write-ups, go to the opposition school websites, read their write-ups, and don't be afraid to go to the local newspapers from where the tournament is getting held. Myrtle Beach Online example, or the Conway newspaper in South Carolina, to get that latest information on those teams. So, if you do your due diligence, there's a lot of value in these daytime games because there's a lot of people who just don't end up looking at them, and you could pick off some nice value.
Yeah, it's funny. We talked on it. We'll get to we'll take a look at the live markets too as well. But I know over at sportsgrid.com, you and Teddy have your show at 3:00 Eastern time at sportsgrid.com, and I know I had heard that you had mentioned that it doesn't take much to move the lines early on in college basketball season. So sometimes I know people get confused. They mix is it football? Is it this group of really big, sharp players play? Sometimes it's just 1 or 2 guys and nobody else is betting it, Ralph. And if you get a substantial piece of money down on a game, it's going to move the line.
Yeah, there's a lot of places that have crazy low limits, especially on totals, where, if someone's going to pound a total a couple times, it's going to move the line a half point. So it's not necessarily money. And, we see from the percentages, never are you going to have, when we get to March, never are we going to have a 90% game margin on one game. But if there's something you don't know about a team and they've only played 2 or 3 games and they have a new head coach, people just may not be betting on that team. They may just be waiting to see what happens. So always places to find value. And, another thing is, when you're looking at these tournaments, make sure you check out the box score for the halftime scores. There's a lot of teams that have to exert a lot of energy in the second half if they're trailing to come from behind. Those teams can easily run out of gas in the second of back-to-back games or a third of back-to-back games.
So before we always like to start the show here, guys, do a little bit of a recap there last night, and it was – I don't know, Ralph. Probably a rough night for the Pac-12. Easy to say. I know that because I loved Utah last night, and that was a lot of fun. We'll get to that. But you had Washington State blowing a lead, my Utah there, and losing to Coastal Carolina. Cal getting blown. I mean, it was a rough night for the Pac-12 last night.
I don't know why you screw it up, Joe. We're supposed to do top performances first and then upsets, and you go right into the biggest upsets. It's not that hard of a outline to follow. God damn it!
Did you know?
Top performances, biggest upsets,
Yes.
largest covers. Okay,
I'm just saying.
All
just
so
saying.
let's do
I'm still a little
upsets.
salty from Utah losing last night. Damn it.
So so the biggest upsets there were 7 of them with ups by dogs of 4 or more. Utah, Washington State, and UCLA. So yeah, when the Pac-12 is 3 of them, that's pretty ugly. Tennessee Tech knocked off Winthrop. Hofstra again. You have a 14.5-point dog that won by 10 and dominated even more than that. And the same with Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
I put Nebraska, Omaha there to make it easier to read. They like just Omaha now.
Yep.
Lamar impressed me. Georgetown, you see, I have a typo in there, and Georgetown was another game that at halftime I think they were down 3 or 4. You want to talk about a second half performance?
It serves us right for betting against Patrick Ewing in Madison Square Garden. What the hell were we thinking? Terrible.
Why didn't we bring that up yesterday? And then, Coastal Carolina, that's a team that, that's the upset that I can understand. New Mexico, we had it here as the best bet, but Coastal Carolina, they're hosting that Myrtle Beach. Conway is just outside of Myrtle Beach, just a few miles. Small little gym. They have a decent team, so that's one where you had the home edge, the familiarity, the non-respect against the Pac-12 team. That no surprise in that. I mean, I didn't play on them, but when you have these home teams in the tournaments, and we talked about this last week, there's a big emphasis on them to play well.
Yeah, no, big time. And it was a rough night for the Pac-12 to say the least. But we'll go back, Ralph. Damn it, we'll get let's get the top performers in here for Ralph yells at me again here. And here you go, Ralph. Some of those teams like Hofstra there. Some of these teams, Duke. And how good was Vernon Carey last night, though? I mean, Duke was early on in that game not playing well. Cal kind of was taking it to him, and then kid kind of just took over there, Ralph, in the second half, and it was over.
Yeah, 31-12, absolutely. Bowie for UCLA. Anytime you pull the upset and you're playing 37 minutes and, 29-3, 7-3, that's something to be impressive. And, Luke Garza is a kid from Iowa who they need a big-time scorer, and, him putting up a double-double like he did. And But I look at I love those. I love the box scores like Kinsey did for Marshall. 28 minutes. It's so again he played. He didn't play the whole game. They were playing a inferior foe in Howard, but 14 points, 7 rebounds, 14 assists. I love kids with 14 assists. Add in a steal and 2 blocks, and it just shows you how important he is and what kind of player he is.
Yeah, and then Villanova, they got an interesting matchup here today, too. Probably just getting ready to set off here while you guys are getting ready. I think 2:30 or 3 o'clock is when they'll go there, but another solid performance by Swider there. And listen, there were some interesting ATS over-under covers there, some monster lines. And for those of you that didn't join us yesterday, there is a color combination here. So, Ralph likes to imagine what's going on here, guys. We got green is cash, all right? We figured that out. So green is money. Everything else is just kind of middle of the road, Ralph.
Yeah, no, it's not. Green means you covered. It means money.
Right.
Blue is over like the sky.
Right.
Brown is under like dirt. So it's,
Am I the only one? Well, put that on the damn graphic so we can see. Blue is over, and because you have it on the heading. I see. Oh, okay. All right. I need a swatch. I need a color swatch, Ralph.
May I get an apology, please?
I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. ATS over and under. It's all color coordinated, folks. I promise. I'll write that down next time. Damn.
Well, you see those overs, and all 3 are in the 140s, and we just got crazy high scoring games. The thing that jumps out to me is the under for Pitt, and having an under that goes under by 18 points with a total of 125, that's something you don't often see.
Yeah, well, talk to me about that Central Michigan game. They were getting double digits, too, right? A boatload of points there, and that was anticipated to be a whole lot of scoring in that game, but just it never made it.
Yeah, well, Minnesota again. For those that are with me and have been a customer of mine, I had the Minnesota Butler game under. That team can play defense. They're big. They don't
Yeah.
give up easy shots, and they defend the three very well. So, and they don't press pace. So, uh, missed opportunity for me because, like I said, I played Minnesota Butler under 130 something, and for that total to be in the 150s. Um, there's even when you're handicapping full time, there's times that, I should have looked at it closer, and you break things down. You allot so much time the totals, then look at the tempos, and unfortunately, there are some things that just slip through.
And, of course, guys, we love also not only to give you some of the names and recap some of these games here, but we also want to keep you abreast of some trends and angles here of the day. And, again, you got over 50 games on tap for the card. It started this morning at 11 a.m., guys, and that will keep happening now over the next month or so through the holidays as we get more and more tournaments. But what is a trend and angle that you looked at here today, Ralph? Where are you pointing at?
Well, just marching off couple. And again, I'm just pulling some trends and angles that have high percentages. And I'm not saying I like this team or I like this angle, but what it does help you, look for teams that are good favorites. Look for teams that are bad dogs. Look for teams that have played conference and non-conference. Arkansas 8-1 non-conference the last couple years. Montana 2-9 non-conference. Temple 4-12. Georgia State 14-5. Iona 1-11 non-conference. Cal Poly also just 2-12 after scoring 60 points or less. So when the offense struggles, it tends to carry over. So, I'll start putting more stock into the angles, and we'll start going a little deeper into them. When we're into December and we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games under the belt where we know there's a legitimate carryover. We know the coach is the same. We know the style stays the same, and teams that have been good favorites continue to be good favorites. So, that's sort of why we're just blowing through them now. We'll clearly spend, for those that, watch Bet on It for the TNA segments or, the other segments I do, we'll be getting much more into those, giving you systems and situations that have been beneficial once we get a few more games into the season.
So we'll take a look here at the live markets like we do each and every day for you guys. And, before we get to what's going on the board, I do want to remind you guys that it's a very special day today on Friday, this 22nd of November. It is the season's been under a couple of weeks now, 3 weeks into the season. And, Ralph, we've got your very first 5% play up at wagertalk.com, do we not?
We do. And, in fact, Joe, I am 30 games in, and I've only had 3 plays that were 4% or higher. I've gone 2-1 on those. So, it's a great time. College basketball 5% plays are something that don't happen very often. Obviously, there's a bunch of things that line up, and I look at positive for this team, positive for this team, positive for this team, negative for this team, negative for this team, negative for this team. And really, in my head, when those things and those situations line up and the line value is there and the technical aspects are there and the matchups are there, then it can become one of those rare 5% plays.
Yep, it's up there. It's available now, guys. Wagertalk.com is where you go. That is wagertalk.com in case you haven't done that yet. First of all, welcome into the Happy Hour Tip-Off Show, guys. Thanks for dropping by every Monday through Friday. Ralph or I are here breaking down what happened the night before in college hoops and getting you ready, of course, for the day ahead. And there's going to be plenty of action from this point on, guys. We'll be talking college hoops till baseball starts, and after baseball starts. And we always love to take a look at the markets, guys, give you an idea of what's going on, some of the biggest movers, some of the biggest plays, what do we see. And there was one game, Ralph, and we've got a couple of marquee ones that we'll talk about here in just a few. But one of the off the beaten path, like the line movement is what hit me the biggest here. How about Harvard, Holy Cross? Now, we've talked about Harvard here, Ralph, a whole bunch of times over the couple of weeks. But, anytime you get a 4.5 point swing like this, Harvard obviously was a favorite. They opened up at about a 12-point favorite. But, man, oh, man, they just shot 16 and a half in some places here, Ralph. Looks to be a big swing for Holy Cross, but yet Holy Cross, believe it or not, only 15% of the tickets on Holy Cross, Ralph, but they're getting nearly 50% of the money. What gives here?
Well, you're looking at an added game where only a handful of casinos have them, and one person bet them, and the rest of them moved. Yep. So I don't necessarily agree with the move. Harvard still has a couple guys banged up and haven't been filled, but perhaps the report came out. I did not read a report that they've got guys back healthy. Perhaps there was, and someone's pounded it. But when you don't see lines across the board and there's only limited casinos that have action, it takes even less money to move it. So it could just be a few people hitting that game, and that's the reason for that move.
Another interesting game here, Ralph, and you had mentioned. Well, I'll bring you this way. How about we do this from a total standpoint here? How about Xavier and Connecticut, guys? Xavier and Connecticut tonight, 9:30 tip-off there. Opened up as a 132.5. I'm showing on the total, Ralph, but this thing's already up to 137, and we're expecting, I guess, an awful lot of scoring here from what it opened up. But Connecticut's pretty good at defending the 3 too, aren't they?
They are, but I mean, I thought that line was low. I looked at that total, but unders have been hitting at 60%. I'm very hesitant to go over the total. But Dan Hurley's pushed the pace. He showed that last year. Xavier, Marshall and Jones are giving them a dynamic duo where they are going to be a force to be reckoned with again. And I think so many people look at the early schedule, and you have to remember Vegas is basing their lines on these early games. Well, you play Towson. Towson's one of the slowest teams out there. Mm-hmm. You just played Missouri State, one of the slowest teams out there. And then you played Missouri in overtime, a slow team, not one of the slowest, but they're certainly in the bottom half.
Right.
So I think that's a situation where someone's picking off a very good number that I completely agree with the line move, because Xavier's scores are very low the last few games because of playing a very slow-tempo team where UConn is not.
Another big game, Ralph, that we're getting an awful lot of tickets on. A lot of people betting this game. How about George Mason, Maryland tonight, 7 o'clock here, Ralph? Maryland's a big favorite in this, but there seems to be a few people betting George Mason anyway. We're getting about 61% of the tickets, Ralph, coming in on Maryland. Just about the same in money. So I don't know what's dragging people at a double digit like that. Opened up at 16, it's moved to 18, but seems to be a big ticket total on Maryland, George Mason tonight.
Mason comes in at 5-0, and people see that 5-0 record, and they are impressed. You look at their body of work, though. You look at George Mason's schedule. There are 353 teams in Division I. Their schedule is about 320. Oh. So they may be 5-0, but the best team you've played is Loyola, Maryland, which pretty much explains why you're 5-0.
Yeah, no kidding. That's right. And Maryland too, by the way. A lot of people think a sleeper in the for a Big Ten championship around 4-1. I think 4 or 5-1. Last I checked, Ralph, for them to be able to take down. I don't think it's out of the question. I mean, Maryland's. We watched what they did in the tournament last year. I think a lot of people were impressed.
Oh, I think they're the number 2 team in the Big Ten. Ohio State might get ahead of them because I really like the way Ohio State's playing defense. But, they're clearly 2 or 3. So no dark horse for me. They're one of the co-favorites in my book.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because I got this question yesterday, Ralph. Where do you stand on the future bets for college hoops right now? A lot of people just getting into it now, like, should I be betting like a Maryland? Should I take them 4-1? Is there a point in the season that you think, maybe now would be the time to jump on a conference champion, or if the odds are right, or do you usually wait until after the first of the year before you start looking at that?
I don't bet. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to bet anyone under 6-1. I mean, you get down to the Final Four, your odds, if you're in the Sweet 16 and you just parlayed each of those bets, you're going to get more than that anyway. So unless there's a long shot I like, and I didn't even have anyone this year, the only time I will bet someone, and I did this with Virginia a couple years ago. Not last year when they won, but the year before when I liked them and they were number one, they ended up losing to a 16 seed. But when you find a team that you like and all of a sudden they lose 2 or 3 games in a row and the odds drop back, then there's value jumping on those teams. But unless someone loses a couple games and the sports book is adjustingly fairly based on what they're getting, there's a lot of times, though, when futures are this. The hold on a future is so great because there's only one team that can win. You're not getting fair odds. If they take money, they lower odds. But for a sports book to be fair, if they're taking money and lowering a team's odds, they should be raising the other teams, and they don't often do that. So I am not one to jump into the markets because of that. Oftentimes, you can get almost the exact same value later on when you get into the tournament than you can at the beginning of the season. So why risk that money for the extra couple months, and perhaps injuries can hurt you?
Yeah. How about and we always like to do this too, guys. If you're just joining us on the show, we like to point out some of the underdogs on the card that might be live. Now, Ralph did this yesterday and brought home a couple of the games you looked at, Ralph, and one of them I think you double-dipped yesterday was a 4-point dog in that game, kind of a rivalry game there with the New Mexicos. And, boy, that was a winning play. That is for sure there last night, Ralph.
Well, New Mexico was the best bet. Here on this segment, I gave out UC Irvine plus the 10.5.
Yes.
And I said it's going to be a very slow game. Irvine only has to score a few extra times, or A&M has to go down. Well, guys, for those that don't know, I love helping people manage money. And people think, well, I have to bet action and they have to bet full units on these things to have action. Here's what I do. I take a couple dogs that I think might win outright. I bet a tenth or 2/10 of a unit on them. I parlay them in a money line parlay. So I had New Mexico on the money line. I had UC Irvine on the money line, and I parlayed it into a money line parlay. If it hits, you're getting about 9 units on that payback with those two teams for a very small investment. So that's a way to keep engaged, not hurt your bankroll, and have a lot of fun in case they hit. Well, what happens? Irvine is up, I think, 6 maybe 4 with a minute to go. A&M starts following them, and they missed at least the front end of 3 1-and-1s, and A&M ends up winning by a point that cost me my money line parlay. But we gave it out here as the money line dog. They cashed against the spread. They fell a point short as far as winning outright.
And it's and again, guys, you got so many games on the board, and not enough is said, Ralph, and we'll do it as we go through the season. But understanding how to manage that and how to go ahead, bankroll management in those types of situations and layering the bets, and don't fall in love with the parlays, guys. Stay away from that. Too many people, too many times they hear those stories, Ralph. Well, the guy hit an 18 parlay for 20,000. Yeah. No, that's not the best long-term strategy that you're going to want to have, especially with so many games and so many opportunities in college hoops.
Yeah, as I said, I bet 2/10 of a unit on mine. So, if you're betting 2/10 in a week, you're going to be down 1 unit. That's it. 1 unit at the end of the week if you go over. And you're going to go over a lot, but you have a couple hits and all of a sudden, that's just a fun way to help manage money and keep those that want action invested. You know what? And hey, if you got daytime games and nighttime games, bet a 2-team parlay in the day with the money line. And I'm talking money line parlays because, as you said, Joe, to hit two teams is 4-1, and you're getting paid 2.4 at some places to 1. So you see the juice that's you're missing there.
Yep.
You're betting money line parlays, and all of a sudden, 2 money line parlays, and you're getting 9-1 on your wager. That's the difference between what we're talking about and what you just said about betting parlays, which will cost you in the long run.
Yep. And is there anybody on the board here tonight that you're looking at here that plus money, something that you looked at or saw?
Well, hell, you said the Pac-12 sucks, so I'm going to go with Temple against USC tonight. So,
that's true.
Let's just go ahead and see if that Pac-12 continues for another night.
Yep.
Temple, a solid team. I like USC this year. They've got a couple young kids, the freshman that we talked about that led them in scoring the other night, and I think he was from Chino, just outside of LA there, and. But, Temple's a proven commodity. They have size, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if Temple pulls the upset.
It's funny. I looked at Wake Forest and Davidson. This was a 7.5, maybe 7 or 8 point Davidson favorite. The Demon Deacons were on a little bit of a roll there, and then they got beat by Charlotte in the last game. They got real lazy over there, and I think the 49ers, they had a 13-game winning streak against the ACC, but they're looking to bounce back. This is a good bounce-back situation for them. I like them offensively. They sometimes get very lackadaisical in the defense, but I think this is the kind of spot where they'll go in against Davidson here, and I think they'll clamp down. I think they'll have a nice bounce-back opportunity. I think the number is too high at 8, and would it surprise me if a team that can play as well offensively as Wake Forest, if they bring the same kind of effort that they've had in the past, I think they got a shot at pulling the upset here tonight.
The other thing, Joe, is I think you're getting some value, with the way the game's listed. People think Davidson on the bottom, but the game is at Charlotte. So clearly a slight edge for Wake Forest that they'll have the fans.
Yep.
Davidson, not a very big school anyway. So, I think Wake Forest has to have the edge, which gives them an extra point or two of value as well.
Yep. Now give me, we've got, of course, not only trends and angles, but we do like to look at some of our situational spots that are on the card here, Ralph, whether it be revenge factor or whether it be so many games in so many days. What is on the card? Did you see any sort of situational revenge factor, anything along those lines on the card here tonight?
Well, I mentioned Villanova at the top, and that really would have been my situational play. But since people are viewing this and that game will have gone off, I'm going to talk about Buffalo against Towson. And it's another tournament game. Buffalo lost to UConn last night, and it wasn't pretty, but you have to realize why they lost. And, you look at Buffalo, and they're a very small team this year. Massenburg's playing in the NBA. You had a couple 7-footers that shut down Ayton in Arizona and did what they did last year. Well, your coach, Nate Oates, is now at Alabama. You've got Massenburg playing in the NBA, but you still have a quality team with both of your guards back, a couple guys that were solid transfers that moved out. And yesterday against Connecticut, UConn, of course, has 6'11" Josh Carlton, and he caused Buffalo, whose tallest player is 6'8". Both frontline players got in foul trouble early, and they had no one to cover Carlton. So that changed the entire way Buffalo had to play. Plus, I think they were 5 of 20 from three-point land. Connecticut, a very good three-point shooting team. Towson's not. Towson's number 200 shooting three-pointers. And, now you have a matchup where a team looked bad and we're getting value because of the way they look bad. But I understand why they look bad, and the situation they're in matchup-wise is much better than yesterday. So that's game number 840. Tips off at 7 p.m. Eastern. I saw them drop down as low as some 4.5s. I think it's mostly 5 now across the board. And I will tell you this. This was one of my plays that my customers got, so that's how strongly I feel about it.
All right, situationals we've given you now. We've given you some trends and angles, market movement. Now we'll move on to a couple of the marquee matchups here tonight, Ralph, and we'll start. How about Utah State taking on LSU? Nobody's talked about LSU here ever since Wade went back to his his old stomping grounds there and got upended. But LSU has got the athletes. They're very long. They're very athletic. We know they're going to get better as the season goes on.
Yeah, I'm a fan of both. Utah State, for those that don't know, Utah State is the class of the Mountain West. That was who last year, Joe?
What was that? Utah State?
The class of the Mountain West.
Who was the class of the Mountain West last year?
Nevada.
What a downfall that's been for them this year.
I'm busting chops. Yeah,
that's right. Nevada. And if you ask me what South Carolina, the name of the state is again, I'm not going to be able to tell you. Oh, Mount Rushmore. Damn it!
It's
South
Carolina.
South Dakota. I meant. Damn it, South. I've been up since 3 a.m. I don't want to hear it. South Dakota, and I remembered Mount Rushmore State.
For those that Joe and I joke, when I moved out to Vegas,
yep,
I used to say Nevada. Mm-hmm. So Brian, Leonard, and Marco, and everyone and anyone I knew, it's Nevada. Mm-hmm. You live in this damn state. Say it right. Mm-hmm. So then when Joe and I were doing basketball videos last year, we talked about the Wolfpack a lot, obviously, with what they had. So I had to correct Joe. So in my head, every time I say it, I know I have to say it right because I live here now. Yep. So Joe has to say it right as well.
It's not Nevada. I said it. I had to go, guys. Must have been 3-4 months in a row, and every time I bring it up, he would say it. Now I'm correcting people, and it started off again where for some reason we kept talking about South Dakota. All of these games appearing in South Dakota to start the season, and every time he'd ask me the stupid question every show, and I couldn't remember what the hell it was. What? Well, you know what South Dakota, the name of the state is, and I finally remembered. Mount Rushmore State, damn it.
And let's talk a little basketball.
Little wins, damn it! It's the little wins, Ralph.
Utah State is a team that can play in the Pac-12. Utah State is a team that can play in the Big 12. They're that good. They have that much size. But I like LSU here. It's the loss to VCU doesn't affect me as much. Wayne Wade talked about this he really has prioritized non-conference games. And when you hear our coach talking about quotes like that, it's an important situation. He's got Utah State, and then he's going to play Rhode Island. So he's got a hell of a run here playing in this tournament, and it's going to boost him. LSU has to take care of the ball. They've been very poor taking care of the ball as far as turnovers go. They're one of the worst in the country. But their offense to me is good enough to be able to get there. LSU does not play a lot of bench guys, so when they're playing multiple games in a row, it may hurt them. But in this case, I do lean with them tonight.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm mistaken here, Ralph. And I know there might be a money line play on LSU in that particular game in my near future. But both of these teams too, Ralph. I think it's going to be one of the better games on the card here tonight, but I also think we're going to get way more points than the 149.5, 150 this opened up, because both of these teams, when they get it rolling, both of these teams can score. I don't think it's enough points if that's a possibility. So do you think that maybe two teams that can average 85, 86 a game might be able to hit the 160 mark?
Well, the interesting thing is, and for those that don't know, I mean, you absolutely have to use Ken Palm. I mean, the free information is great. If you pay, I think it's $20 for the year. It's crazy not to. So I think his tempo numbers are the best. So when you look at his tempo numbers are an average of offense versus defense. And if people look at tempo, in this situation, and they're learning how to handicap college basketball, you'll see that Utah State's tempo is 122. Well, you can't have a more disparate offensive and defensive rank. Their offensive length of possession is 32. They press the pace. They go. Their defensive possession average is 334, almost dead last in college. Why? Because all of their guys are 6'6" or 6'7". Right. You have trouble passing the ball.
Yep.
They're like those guys in practice where you see them have big fans on the ends of their hands, and they're blocking passes. So that's the type of team they are. They're very long. They get out there. They defend the three well, and people have trouble getting in gear against them. Well. Right. The reason people have been trouble getting in gear is that Every offense they've played has been 220 or worse. Guess what? LSU's number 17. So, Joe, again, another matchup that I completely agree with you that when you look at the situations, you have to look at why a team is ranked where they are, and it's because of the offenses they faced. That's going to change as they start facing some real offenses up here with LSU and then St. Mary's and then BYU and, even Fresno in the next 5-6 games that they have.
All right, so we said the Pac-12, but we're gonna. I don't know where you're gonna lie in this one, but there is a pretty big marquee matchup here tonight between Houston taking on Oregon. Dana Altman and company there. Those Oregon Ducks. They've been rolling. Taking up just where they left off in the tournament last year. Pretty damn good team, very well coached. Houston laying 7.5 here. Oregon is. What do you like about this game? Total 138.
Well, revenge from last year. Remember, they played back in Houston, and Oregon lost that game 65-61, and the teams were completely different. Houston was a guard team. Oregon had Bol, and, now it's completely opposite. Houston has big forwards that can rebound, and Oregon's a guard-based team. So it's so bizarre seeing two top 30 teams from one year to the next change the way the structure of the team is built. I do lean Oregon here. I'm a fan of this team. I was on them against Memphis when they played those games in Portland a couple weeks ago. And I just think I like teams that have the better guards earlier in the year. And they clearly, Peyton Pritchard is a go-to player who is a stud. And at home, my power rating has them about 10, so I have about 3 points of value with them.
And as another game, Ralph, I looked at that total number of 138, and I think Houston's proven they can't slow anybody down here. So you mentioned how we've got the better guards in Oregon. They're averaging guys. What are they doing? They're averaging about 80 points. They should put up about 80 points in this game. I think that's what we had them figured here is somewhere between that 76 to 80 point range, which means I don't need a whole heck of a lot from Houston. If I can get 60 points from Houston, we hit the over here, Ralph. It seemed a little low to me under that 140 number.
Well, Joe, we go over a lot of games, and there's a lot of times we're going to agree, but I actually would disagree.
All right, good.
I think it is going to be a low-scoring game. Oregon was very slow-paced last year. Obviously, they're going to be faster-paced with their guards.
Right.
But I think Houston's forwards and the rebounding might give them some trouble where they're going to have to slow the ball a little. Oregon, even this year, their average length of possession on offense is 2:15. And, Memphis is one of the fastest-paced teams there are. So I think, I'm actually looking at a lower-scoring game. If I had to give a score, I'd be in the 72-62 range with my 10-point edge. So, like I said, they're going to get opinions on games. There's times we agree, and there's going to be times we disagree.
Yeah, Cougars giving up right around 72 points per game. Ducks allowing 63. And like you said, though, if we get a little bit less than any of those, it might be hard to reach that 138 number. So, all right, Ralph, you put them all together here. Best bets time. Is there one out of the ones? Did we hear one yet, or are you double dipping, or are you pulling another one here we haven't heard?
Well, I was gonna go with Rhode Island, but that's a 4:30 game.
You're right.
So I can't do that. So Joe, why don't you give one, and I'm gonna come up with another one.
Oh man, you didn't want to do that. Well, I'll tell you what, Ralph. We talked about this. We mentioned this game earlier, and I just think it's just way too many points here. How about George Mason getting 17.5? I do love Maryland. Don't get me wrong. We both love Maryland this year, but this is going to be obviously George Mason's toughest test of the year so far. They are undefeated, but I think what we have seen, even against the lesser competition, I think what we've seen should be a little bit better than 17.5 points here. I think they went 11-7 in the A10 last year. They're 5-0 heading into this against Maryland. Jordan Miller has scored more than 20 points a game, I believe, here at this point, at least over the last couple of games. I don't know. Maryland over the years, Ralph, not great against the A-10. They seem to have given Mark Turgeon and company there a little bit of an issue. So 6-2, I believe, George Mason in their last 8 non-conference games. 17.5 seems way out of whack to me, Ralph. What do you think?
Hey, no opinion on the side. You make a strong case for it. So I'm rooting. And, I'm going to go to a team that's familiar with us, and we've mentioned a few times over the last few days, and I'm going to go back to San Diego State.
Oh,
You're Texas Southern a win, BYU a win, Grand Canyon a win, San Diego a big win. And normally I wouldn't be looking to play a team that just faced their rival on Wednesday and is playing 2 days later. But, they're not taking anything for granted. They were 9-7 last year to start the year, so they were trading wins and losses. And LIU, that's Derek Kellogg's team, the old Ohio State player, is their head coach. They press tempo. So when I have a better team at home in a situation where I know they have superior talent against an inferior foe who likes to press the pace, that really gives you a good scoring opportunity. Let your young kids play. LIU is, clearly a bottom half team playing in the Northeast Conference. They're 1-3 this year. They've lost to Rhode Island, UMass Lowell, and to George Mason. And their win was Delaware State. And for those that don't know, Delaware State is Michigan State is here. Delaware State's on the opposite end. They're probably one of the worst 4 teams in college basketball. So beating them shouldn't affect one thing. Yeah, it may give us an extra line value because LIU's 1-3 instead of 0-4, but it doesn't mean anything. So this is a money game for LIU, and I will lay it with San Diego State.
One question before we get Ralph. Somebody had sent in to us. They wanted to know, Ohio State is playing. They want to know how many Purdue's are there, Ralph, because they wanted to know if that was like the Purdue or is it another team, because apparently they're playing Purdue-Fort Wayne tonight there, Ralph, not what people might would consider to be Purdue.
Yeah, there's Purdue Fort Wayne and there's IUPUI.
Yeah,
there's Purdue University of Indiana. So there are 3 Purdue's. The Fort Wayne Mastodons. If he this person, whoever it is, hopefully he's watching, and if he follows me on Twitter, he'll go back into my timeline. And earlier today, I said I was close to using Ohio State today, but reading the Columbus Dispatch, Holtman, talked about Wesson was banged up. He missed practice this week. And I'm just going to read what I sent on Twitter.
Perfect.
Holtman didn't want to divulge specifics, but 3 or 4 players could be questionable for this game against the Mastodons after a flu bug has affected the team, and a few practice injuries have piled up. So you never know what you get with the flu bug. You can really have a team that plays poorly. You can have sometimes, you get the Michael Jordan effect where you take an IV and you play great with the flu for one game. But, with that being in question, it's just one of those simple things. If you have doubt, leave the game off. It's better to leave a winner off than it is to put a loser on, because you're paying the 10% on the loser. So to me, you do your due diligence. I like the matchups with Ohio State. I love the defense they play. I like they were playing this Mastodons team that has some pace. But when you start reading the newspapers and get caught up with what's happened, it just makes it a simple no play.
All right, and here's a no-brainer, guys. Ralph, 5% play. It is up. It is ready to go here at Wager Talk. It's his first one of the college basketball season, and for those of you that might be new, when you go to wagertalk.com, you'll see it right there. You can go to the Cal Sports page, but there are always those questions, Ralph. Well, what does that mean to 5%? Well, it basically means these are pretty special plays, Ralph. 5%. I don't know that you can get any more happy or confident with your play than when you put a 5% next to it.
Well, I'm gonna yes and no, Joe. Yes, I only probably use 5 or maybe 8 in a year in college
Mm-hmm.
basketball, one a month, and then there's a couple months where there's 2. But you still have to remember, I'm suggesting to people to play 3%, 4%, 5%.
Right.
So you're never doubling up a play. No matter if it's my first 5% play, if it's my only 5% play, it's still a game where you have 18-year-old kids playing point guard. If your point guard gets hurt in the first play of the game, you lose your value. So yes, it's stronger. Yes, I'm more confident, but there is not much of a difference between my 3% and my 5%. I play them all the same. I tell my customers to play them all. There's no way you should be leaving off at 3% because your bankroll's too small. If that's the case, you're betting too much.
Right.
All my plays are very close to being the same. Yes, the 5% get extra hype. Yes, they're guaranteed. But to me, there is not that much of a difference in the play.
There you go. It's available right now, guys, for tonight. WagerTalk.com. And as always, want to ask you guys to go ahead and subscribe here on YouTube as you guys are watching this. If you're on Twitter or any one of the other platforms, always subscribe to the channel here. Never miss a show. Monday through Friday, the Happy Hour Tip-Off Show. Ralph and I will be here getting you ready for the day in college hoops. So, Ralph, plenty going on here today. And, of course, throughout the weekend, we'll be back on Monday to break it all down. So, best of luck to you, my man. Thank you very much. Good luck, and we'll talk on Monday.
Joe, have a great weekend, bud. We'll talk to you Monday.
You got it. The Happy Hour Tip-Off Show powered by WagerTalk.com. Good luck, guys.